And then on the part 5, on the section 5 or whatever I want to call this, I don't know, I got wall turn here, because in Gen 4 we got introduced with U-turn, a really great move for momentum, and in Generation 5 we got a partner move in the form of a Volt Switch. Of course the problem was that ground types were completely immune to it, but at the same time it kind of created this own playstyle simply called Volt Turn with Volt Switch and U-turn. You were able to really get momentum with Pokemon such as Rotom Wash and Scissor, completely just U-turning and Volt Switching and getting that momentum, getting that good chip damage on your opponent's team, and just mainly that momentum. Momentum is the name of the game when it comes to these moves, and that is what they were able to really gain for your team. And now that you had Volt Switch, you had, you had this natural synergy with these moves, and basically that created this wall turning play style that kind of became its own thing and a nuisance. And I believe at one point there were, even talks about banning the moves, or it was kind of just a discussion going at the Smogon forums. I don't think it got any kind of official support there, but it was still talked about. And when you face wall turning teams, you you are definitely in trouble, and it's just really difficult to deal with them, because he's gonna go for the Volt Switch or he's gonna go for the U-turn, and I have to switch out, but I know as I switch out he's just gonna be getting the momentum. So that's where the I guess the discussion came for it, why the moves were talked about being banned by some people, some minority crew over there. But definitely annoying moves, and the U-turn already had wide distribution, but now that it gained a partner move, made it even a better of a combination. And yeah, that's how the wall turning shenanigans began. And I think everybody remembers that from the Generation 5 metagame. It was always a nuisance. And from this, I'm gonna segue my way into more moves. And number 4, I got the new moves of Generation 5, and there were 92 in total. And definitely the move that had the biggest impact when it comes to like the distribution of it and the impact of it, like how many Pokemon used it. I think the move of the Generation 5 was definitely Scald. Because you saw that everywhere. It basically replaced Surf on every bulky water. Because it was just... Because the power drop really didn't matter. It was not really a big deal, as the reward was something greater. Getting a burn on whatever switches in. And it kind of fights against this rule that is in the competitive Pokemon scene. That always go for the move that has the highest, the smallest. Always go for the move that has the smallest risk but the highest reward. But then with Scald, it says, okay, I'm just gonna spam it, whatever happens. Okay, you're facing a Terrakion. You think, okay, maybe this grass type is gonna be switching in, but you don't care. You can just go for the Scald, and most likely you will get the burn. And even though they say it's like 30% of the time, it kind of felt like the opposite. Like, the thing with Focus Blast and Scald is like, it really seems the other way around. Scald burns 70% of the time, and Focus Blast hits 30% of the time. Of course, I'm kind of joking here, but when you think about it, you just see Scald like everywhere, and it's just so easy to spam. And it's I think that there was some also discussion going on about the possible like ban or the brokenness of Scald, because it's a move that you can just easily spam without any precautions really. You just go for it. And it basically meant that physical sweepers couldn't switch into these bulky waters because they were fearing that they would get burned. That was a huge issue. And something like Ferrothorn that would normally wall all the defensive Politoads, if you switch into Scald, then you just end up getting burned. And that was often the scenario. Like, Why in the world would Politoed stay in? Defensive Politoed. Why would it stay in against Ferrothorn? It's always just fishing for a skull burn. And most of the time, you just get it. You go for skull, Ferrothorn switches in, you don't get the burn. Okay, I'll just go for it again. Most likely I will get the burn. And most of the cases you did. And it was just a move that you could just easily spam and take advantage of. And again, it kind of fought against this smallest risk and highest reward kind of mentality that a lot of competitive Pokemon battlers had, because it was just a move that you could spam, and it always just had a really high reward, as you could just, even if your opponent switches out into something, you know, it doesn't matter, because most likely I will just get the Skull burn. But enough of Skull, but definitely I'd say the move of the generation. And because yeah, there were like, on top of that, like, it was a TM, so simply so many Pokemon got it that it had this wide distribution too. But anyways, now enough is enough about Scald. Then we got some other moves. I got Shell Smash here, Quiver Dance, Home Claws. Those were kind of the boosting moves of the generations. Home Claws wasn't that really that common, but Quiver Dance and Shell Smash definitely on the Pokemon that did have those. You know, Game Freak definitely thought this out, that they made these quite on paper broken boosting moves, but then they didn't really give it to all the good Pokemon, or even too many, because Quiver Dance is mostly on the butterfly Pokemon, bug types, and then Shell Smash on some few random Pokemons with shells, basically, like Cloyster. And Cloyster was never really a good Pokemon, but suddenly in Generation 5, thanks to Shell Smash, it became a top tier threat. Or maybe not a top tier, but a threat regardless, that you always needed to watch out for, especially with the skill link and the Icicle Spear, Rock Blast, Power buff. Or I don't think Rock Blast got buffed up, but I think Icicle Crash did. But anyways, moving on, Psyshock. That's definitely an interesting move that gave special attackers mostly Psychic type options to deal with special walls. For example, Latios could now strike that Blissey relatively hard with that Psyshock on the switch, and Alakazam definitely benefited from this move also. And just an interesting concept for a move that it uses your special attack, but then hits your opponent on the physical side, something that we hadn't seen in the past. And also you had the more powerful version in form of Psy Strike, but only Mewtwo got it, and I guess, you know, Smeargle, but Smeargle gets everything, so you don't need to count that in, really. But it was the signature move of Mewtwo that definitely abused the Psy Strike. And then Keldeo had the Secret Sword that worked the same way, but it was a fighting type move. And I believe 90 base power, yes. And then more interesting weird moves got Foul Play that basically, was it a 90 base power move too? But basically the gimmick with that is that it, as opposed to using your own attack, it actually uses your opponent's attack, which kind of made it a situational move. But on Pokemon that didn't naturally have high attack, you could have some gimmicky uses with Foul Play. It was never really that popular of a move, but you know, some dark types like Umbreon could definitely abuse it. You know, they already get also stabbed, and then you get to use your opponent's attack. So that's definitely a really interesting concept for a move also, besides Psy Strike. But anyways, enough with that. Next on the list I got Dragon Tail, definitely interesting phasing move. And one thing it has over something like Whirlwind or Roar is the fact that you cannot taunt this move, because it also does damage. I think it was like 60 base power move, and then it phases you out. But then the downside to Dragon Tail is that if your opponent has a sub up, and because of the nature of the move, it's a weak move, most of the time it's not going to be breaking a sub. And if your opponent has a sub up, then you're not going to be able to phase your opponent out. But then again, the thing with Dragon Tail is that it gave some Pokemon that didn't have a phasing move to begin with a phasing move. I can't really think of Which Pokemon didn't have a phasing move? At least Milotic didn't have. I'm sure there would have been some better examples, but whatever. Let's just move on from the Dragon Tail, but still definitely interesting move. Another phasing option at least. So then we got Hurricane and Acrobatics, both flying type moves. Hurricane, I believe the most powerful special flying type move, and then the Acrobatics already mentioned, coupled with the Flying Gems. That was a really interesting combination, because you first use your Flying Gem and then it also gets the double boost, because how Acrobatics works is that it's 55 base power, but once you lose your item it becomes double the base power. So definitely a move to be coupled with the Flying Gem for sure. But I don't think it honestly didn't have too big of an impact in the singles meta game, but still, you know, bulk up tornadoes, that was a really cool thing that I guess could abuse it with Flying Gem, and it was definitely interesting set. I remember running a few times in the I think even in the UU metagame, because that is where the tornadoes eventually dropped. But yeah, definitely an interesting new move in Generation 5, and after losing your item you have that 110 base power, so nothing to really laugh at. And then we got Icicle Crash, a much needed physical ice type move that definitely made for a nice move for at least for good old Mamoswine. Kieran Black never got it, ha ha ha. But Mamoswine got it, and you could definitely abuse it. Yeah, Mamoswine kind of gained a lot in form of Thick Fat and Icicle Crash, and also Icicle Spear. It could also use that, but Icicle Crash, a solid physical ice type move, something more powerful than Ice Punch, and it was definitely nice for the few ice types that actually did get it. Icicle Crash was still kind of limited distribution, but still a nice addition to the physical ice type moves, most definitely. And then stored power, mentioned that already with the Sigilyph example from earlier, but I guess on the most cases that I was seen was with the Baton Pass moves, but still kind of interesting concept for a move. Gets more powerful depending on how many boosts do you have, but Psychic on its own kind of a limited coverage, especially on that Sigilyph. But on baton passing teams, you definitely saw that move, like with Espeon and Umbreon and things of that nature. But still a new type of move, which was, in my opinion, interesting kind of concept. And then we got Wild Charge, which was a bit more of a powerful electric type move as opposed to something like Thunder Punch. It still didn't make Electivire OU, but you know, at least Ewire got something. But yeah, indeed, we didn't have too many good physical electric type moves, and Wild Charge also had quite wide of a distribution, because like a bunch of fire types and normal types got that too, so it was the kind of move that a lot of Pokemon that could learn. So definitely a nice thing that we had another physical electric type move that was slightly more powerful than the Thunder Punch. And then we got Final Gambit. That's a fighting type move that and does damage depending on how much HP do you have left. So it didn't have too big an impact like the most things that you saw using it, I think, were like Final Gambit Victini and then Acceligor in the lower tiers. And I guess the Raptor too. That thing also got Final Gambit. But you could basically just run it as a suicide lead, Scarfer, all those things. Or Acceligor was kind of fast to begin with, but it's a mid-card gimmick, lower tier gimmick. So I don't know, but still kind of an interesting concept that depending on how much HP do you have left, and it's not from your base HP, but indeed how much HP do you have left. So on that, because of that, it was kind of a gimmicky use, because you cannot afford to, you know, switch into like Stealth Rocks too many times, because then it will just weaken the power of it. So you kind of have to just act fast, but then you just kind of have to kill yourself on the first turn and take something down with you. So you lose one, you gain one. So that's the kind of thing with the final gambit, pretty much. That's why it's a gambit move. And then we got a low sweep. And the main things that were using it really well, the only main thing that was really using it was Technician Breloom, and then also Technician Hitmontop. Yeah, that thing also got it, but not too big of an impact on that move, but it's still something interesting that Gen 5 brought. But 60 base power and lowers your opponent's speed, and Breloom could definitely take advantage of this move. And then the couple of last things that I got here, White Guard and Rage Power. Those are mostly seen in the doubles metagame, but over there they did have at least some sort of impact. Again, I'm not much of a doubles player, but especially Rage Power Among Us, that was definitely seen quite often, because you can force your Among Us to beat a target and then do some shenanigans with your own partner. And I believe it also, yeah, that's how it works, because it has priority, so your opponent is forced to target your Among Us if you're not using something like a spread move that hits both of your opponents. But definitely interesting move for the double scene. At least, I have been watching, like, at least on the Nugget Bridge channel, I do tend to watch their double battles, and you often see the Rage Power used there. And yeah, definitely an interesting move. That was something that Gen 5 brought us. And right now, I think I'm gonna move to part 3, or the section 3, or the whatever, as I'm starting to lose my voice after talking for so freaking long, and we're still going. So got the abilities here, and Generation 5, it introduced 41 new abilities, coupled with some Dream World abilities for some old Pokemon that made some old Pokemon better than they used to be. But if we would start with some new abilities, got Magic Bounce here, Multi-Scale, Regenerator, Prankster, and new Sturdy that I already mentioned, and also Storm Drain. Those abilities were definitely nice, that got buffed up and kind of became relevant in Gen 5. But then Sand Rush and Sand Force, and then Sheer Force, and also Moxie. I do believe I had a list of all the new abilities. Yes, there we go. Found it. I guess I could quickly just go through this list, because only 41 abilities. So we got Pickpocket, Sheer Force, Contrary, Unnerve, Defiant, Defeatist, Cursed Body, Healer, Friend Guard, Weak Armor, Heavy Metal, Light Metal, Multi-Scale, yeah, Toxic Boost, Flare Boost, Harvest, that's a decent one, Telepathy, Moody, that was an ability that got kind of banned quickly due to its random nature and uncompetitiveness. Then got Overcoat, Poison Touch, Regenerator, Big Pecs, Sand Rush, Wonder Skin, Analytic, Illusion for Zoroark, Imposter, yes, for Ditto, Infiltrator, Mummy, Moxie, Justified, Rattled, Magic Bounce, Sap Sipper, Prankster, Sand Force, Iron Barbs, Zen Mode, Victory Star, Turbo Blaze, and Terravolt. And those are the new abilities of Generation 5, but you know, most of them are not really competitively good, but the ones that I just mentioned, you know, Magic Bounce, Multi-Scale, Regenerator, Prankster, and then Sand Rush, Sand Force, Sheer Force, and Moxie, those are arguably the best abilities out of the new ones that we got in Generation 5. And I guess I could talk about these more, but I guess my personal favorites would be probably Regenerator and Sheer Force, but also Moxie, Multi-Scale, so many good ones. But Regenerator and Sheer Force kind of had the widest distribution in that sense, biggest impact. And Prankster was also quite highly distributed on something like whatchamacallit, Prankster, Sableye, Whimsicott, things like that. It was kind of a cool ability. Something really revolutionary at the time. But now, some Dream World abilities, because a lot of old Pokemon got buffed up, and definitely the first and the worst thing that comes to mind is Speed Boost Blaziken. There was also Speed Boost Sharpedo, but you know, it didn't get any good boosting moves. Like Blaziken has Swords Dance, so you have Swords Dance, Protect, Flare Blitz, High Jump Kick. That is pretty much all you need, and you destroy the entire metagame 6 times over, except for a few gimmicky things, and that is what led into the ban of Blaziken. But that was a huge buff for Blaziken. And then we have a Chlorophyll Venusaur. That was a thing, and coupled with the buff that it got with the whatchamacallit, the boosting move, the growth, yes, in the sun +2. That was definitely a nice thing for the Venusaur. You could also put things to sleep, and basically Venusaur became the #1 chlorophyll sweeper, coupled with the sun bringing Ninetales. And Technician Breloom, I think I mentioned that already, but Mach Punch, Bullet Seed, Low Sweep, and then Spore, and then you're basically good to go. Breloom's stab combination with the Technician really hits hard, and it kind of just became more used than the Poison Heal, which is not really a bad ability to begin with, but Technician Breloom was just a really awesome Pokemon, because Mach Punch kind of brings you better offensive coverage as opposed to something like Bullet Punching Scissor. Although Ghosts are immune to it, but you kind of destroy Ghosts with like Bullet Seed. That's the problem with the Technician Breloom, is that even the things that do kind of like wall you might just end up getting destroyed by 5 Bullet Seeds. And something like Gengar that you think deals with it, no, it cannot deal with 5 Bullet Seeds, and it kind of gets destroyed. So there is that. And then of course Multi-Scale Dragonite, talked about that multiple times, but absolutely wonderful ability for the Dragonite. Coupled with its good and natural bulk, it was definitely able to abuse it. There was the annoying multi-skill Parashuffler with Sob and Dragon Tail, that was also a thing for it. And Dragonite in general kind of gained a lot of things, like with Hurricane, and in the rain it could abuse like Thunder, Hurricane, and Aqua Tail and stuff like that, and the Parashuffler, Dragon Tail thing. Dragonite was already really versatile, and now it was even more versatile than it was in the past. And then, who could forget? Poison Heal Gliscor. Oh, the annoying one. I think everybody remembers Gliscor from the Protect Sob Toxic set. That was extremely annoying, most definitely. And yeah, Poison Heal Gliscor could also be the status absorber of your team, and Poison Heal, just overall a great ability for Gliscor. And it basically didn't even need Roost, which it got in Black and White 2. And that's how good Gliscor just was. Overall, really solid physical wall and a big nuisance. And then we got Imposter Ditto. That's a really interesting Pokemon. There was some speculation, would that thing be broken and kind of destroy Hyper Offense and whatnot, but in the end, you know, it's so gimmicky. There's no solid strategy when it comes to using Ditto. It just completely depends on what your opponent brings. And while the Imposter Ditto had some good momentum when it was released, a lot of people used it. In the end, you know, the unreliable nature of it, you know, meant that it never really became OU in the end, and you could just use it in basically all the tiers. And I think it was like it was NU, it was stuck in the NU tier like it was in the beginning. But Imposter still gave Ditto a purpose, and it just kind of became this ultimate revenge killer. And whenever you see Ditto, you gotta watch out. Okay, if I try to boost up here, I might just end up getting swept by my own Pokemon that is faster than mine with the Choice Scarf. So it basically gave Ditto a purpose in life, and that was really awesome for it. Imposter, really unique ability, something that Ditto definitely needed. And then Magic Guard Alakazam. That was really cool. And if we talk about like Magic Bounce Espeon. Alakazam was always kind of the better fast psychic type. It had higher base speed and also better coverage moves. So it was kind of funny that in the beginning of the Black and White era, when Espeon got Magic Bounce, it kind of just bounced up to the OU tier, while Alakazam was left back to bite the dust. And it was actually in the RU tier until it got Magic Guard, and basically it allowed it to run Life Orb with no recoil, and also it doesn't need to worry about the Sandstorm, which is really common in the OU tier. Not to mention it could also run Focus Sash, because Focus Sash wasn't really that reliable of an item in Generation 5, but Magic Guard Alakazam was one of the few Pokemon that could reliably abuse Focus Sash. And it's kind of cool that finally with Magic Bounce Espeon and Alakazam with Magic Guard, these two Pokemon that had a similar attributes, both being fast, hard-hitting, psychic type Pokemon that had Synchronize with their abilities, now gave them kind of different roles, as Espeon went ahead and kind of became a support Pokemon with dual screens and bouncing back entry hazards, and then Alakazam still just remained to be this offensive behemoth that, or better yet, offensive glass cannon that it has always been, but with the Magic Guard it gave it more options in the form of Focus Sash and Life Orb mainly. And then we got Rain Dish Tentacruel. That was a nuisance coupled with the Rain teams and spamming Scald and everything, but again, Tentacruel not having reliable recovery definitely appreciated the Rain Dish in the rain heavy metagame definitely, and it just made Tentacruel a better spinner than it was already, and coupled with Protect, you had at least more reliable recovery than you had in the past, and that was a great thing for the good old Tentacruel. And then Roughskin Garchomp, you know, with that, like I already said, you know, Garchomp got banned in the Gen 4 metagame and then again in the Gen 5 metagame, but it did get the Dreamworld ability Roughskin, and that kind of led into a situation where they were actually, Smogon was actually able to bring Garchomp back for their metagame, and that was kind of a cool thing that they were able to do once the Dreamworld abilities were released. But outside of that, you know, Roughskin Garchomp didn't have that big of an impact. Right now it's Garchomp just taking fake outs from Kangaskhan or returns and power up punches in Gen 6. But let's not talk about Gen 6, shall we? And then a couple of Pokemon that never got their Dreamworld abilities that I think I already briefly mentioned, were Shadow Attack, Chandelure, and then Contrary Serperior. And also another interesting Pokemon would have been Sheer Force Feraligatr with like Ice Punch and Waterfall and things like that. I think it definitely would have gone up a tier, but it never got it in Generation 5 metagame, so who knows? Maybe now we will get those, although no Shadow Attack Chandelure. Who knows about Contrary Serperior, but Shadow Attack Chandelure is gone. But Sheer Force Feraligatr would have loved to see it, but never got the chance, unfortunately. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, Drizzle, Politoed, and Drought Ninetales. Already briefly talked about these, and on that note, I would kind of like to segue myself into the second part, or the second section of this little random talk show session, top tier, top 10 thing list that I got here. And number 2, I have, of course, the Weather Wars. Who could forget? That is what, for many people, Generation 5 was all about. And Gen 5 definitely introduced us with a unique situation where we were finally able to run Perma-Rain and Perma-Sun in the standard metagame, something that we were not able to do in the past because the only users only users that had these abilities were Kyogre and Groudon, but now we had Drizzle, Politoed, and Grout, Ninetales, and I really gotta give credit for Game Freak actually giving these abilities to some really bad Pokemon. And Drizzle and Grout definitely gave Ninetales and Politoed a purpose in the competitive scene. And you know, you can also see Ninetales and Politoed used in Nintendo's own metagame in the VGCs. And even so, I guess thinking about their VGC metagame, it also gave a purpose for those Pokemon in their own metagame, although Game Freak, you know, kind of just makes the games for Nintendo and stuff like that. But I guess Game Freak thought that, hey, you know, these Pokemon suck, and let's give them a purpose in life. So they gave them Politoed and Ninetales these weather abilities, and suddenly they were relevant in the competitive scene. Of course, with the on the Smogon scene, the Drizzle got Drizzle and the Swift Swim. They introduced that complex ban. You know, complex bans are always like a thing that you try your best to avoid, even at Smogon. But you know, the ban of Drizzle Swift Swim combination, it was still, I think, the best move for the metagame, because again, it was this unique situation. You have never had perma rain in the metagame, so outright banning of Politoed would have been kind of just an outrageous thing to do right off the bat. So they ended up doing this complex ban, and you know, definitely the rain sweepers right off the bat, like King for Kabutops and then whatchamacallit, I guess even almost started with a Shell Smash, and then in the rain with Swift Swim, and then also, I guess, what's the dancing Pokemon, Ludicolo. Those were kind of dominant in the rain, so you had to do something about them. So Smogon made that little complex ban, and I do still think it was the best move for the metagame, and we got to at least we got to what's the word I'm looking for? Live in a metagame experience. Yes, experience. Why am I missing such simple words? I do not know. We got to experience the joys of perma rain in the OU tier, and rain was definitely, has always been kind of the most versatile weather, because there are so many different abilities that can abuse it, like the rain dish, and you know, the Swift Swim for the little time it was allowed, and dry skin, and then you got the 50% boost for water type moves, and that is what really made like Specs Politoed dangerous, and something like Specs Keldeo too, spamming those Hydro Pumps. And you could spam Thunders, you could spam Hurricanes now in Gen 5, and you have all these abilities that also made Toxicroak relevant in the metagame, something that nobody really saw coming, but Toxicroak really became a good Pokemon thanks to the perma rain. And now that's probably not the case in Generation 6 anymore, but again, let's not talk about that. But Weather Wars definitely had a huge impact, and then again, had Smogon banned perma rain like Politoed completely, then that would have just made Sand and Sun more used. So I don't know. You know, I think it was definitely the best move that they could have done, the complex ban of the Drizzle and Swift Swim, even though it was a complex ban. But still, in the end, you know, when it comes to Generation 5, what do you remember from Gen 5? Weather Wars, most definitely. But even then, like, if you look at the Smogon's usage statistics, it was still like over 50% of the teams, for the most part, were weatherless teams, because, you know, obviously the weather does kind of restrict your team to use like certain Pokemon, you know, always Politoed and Ninetales. So when you got options outside of weather, you definitely have more options, but still, definitely weather games were dominating in the OU tier, even though they weren't taking over the tier, but they were still everywhere for the most part, if that makes any kind of sense. But I think it was definitely a nice experience to see what the metagame would be like, the standard metagame would be like in the with the Weather Wars, and now we got to experience that. And I guess Game Freak also thought, oh, perhaps we made a mistake, because in Gen 6 they of course did nerf the perma weather, so that is definitely a thing. But Weather Wars everywhere, and you know, speaking of, you know, I gotta mention something about sand. You know, of course, sand got buffed up in a way that they got Excadrill with Sand Rush, and also that doggy Stoutland. But of course, that double speed with in the sand was kind of too much, especially for Excadrill. That was a really broken Pokemon in the sand with double speed, outspeeding everything, and it kind of got quickly banned. But then Stoutland kind of, you know, it was never really that good of a Pokemon. But it's definitely nice that they tried to do something with sand, because there were not so many, when compared to rain, there weren't too many abilities to abuse it. But unfortunately, again, hail never really got anything. I don't think it got anything in Generation 5. If you don't want to mention like new Pokemon like Kyurem that could abuse hail somewhat, spamming blizzards, but you know, hail didn't really get anything new. And you know, Sun gained an awesome Chlorophyll Venusaur Sweeper. That was a thing, and spamming weak creates in the sun, that was a lot of fun. I remember at the beginning of the tier, when Vulpix was still allowed in the underused tier for a little while, oh man, Victini was really broken back then. Let's just put it like that, but it was good times. It was definitely good times with Weather Wars. But yeah, Gen 5 was definitely a weather dominant meta game, although it was not too much, but still it was always present. It was always there. You could feel the presence of the Weather Wars, most certainly. And with that, we move on to number 1 on this list of random things, and that is what I got here is Team Preview. And that definitely had a huge impact, and it kind of changed the nature of how the game was played. It kind of killed most of the dedicated leads, although now there were a lot more of just weather leads in general. But Focus Sash kind of took a dump, because because you saw Team Preview, you saw what your opponent had. There was no purpose for the good old fashioned dedicated leads like Focus Sash, Suicide Lead, Azelf, or Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl definitely took a hit. It was a OU Pokemon top tier, a Suicide Lead. It was a really good Pokemon in Generation 4. It was really fast. It could use Taunt and then live a hit with Focus Sash and guarantee that you would have rocks and your opponent wouldn't. That was the thing that made Aerodactyl really popular in Generation 4. But now with the nature of Team Preview, you know it's there. You can play accordingly, and it just kind of killed all these dedicated leads. But yeah, like I said, I guess weather leads kind of became more popular. And I guess Rotom Wash was kind of one of the often common seen leads because of its utility and volt switching all around, and its good defensive typing. It was the guy who could, you know, do anything, and it kind of performed as a lead too in that way. And speaking of more of the Team Preview, it kind of also killed things like a Gyra-Wire, which was kind of a thing at the Generation 4 metagame, but that's another nail in the coffin for the Gyra-Wire combination, because you could see it. If your opponent is running that, it's obvious that you're gonna try it out, so it became even less useful than it was at the end of the Generation 4 era. And then the thing with Generation 4 was that you were able to keep your late game sweeper hidden, and you tried your best to do scouting, so it kind of killed the scouting. And you know, in Generation 4 there was really no reason to not use Whirlwind and Roar, even if you don't have hazards up, because you want to scout your opponent's team. So it kind of just killed that scouting, and also the U-turn scouting in that sense. Although U-turn and volt switch are useful, definitely for momentum still, but it kind of just killed this scouting nature or that we had in the past. And the thing with the late game sweepers, you can no longer keep them hidden. That was a really big thing in Generation 4. You tried your best. You were really hoping when your opponent was using something like Whirlwind that your opponent, he doesn't bring out that Lucario that is your hidden last Pokemon, your late game sweeper. And it just kind of changed everything, because you just have to play completely different. You know your opponent's team. You basically know from the start what you need to do in order to win. Which Pokemon do you have to eliminate in order to sweep with the main sweeper of your team? Or you know right off the bat which Pokemon on your opponent's team, if you're like running stall, you know which Pokemon are gonna be the biggest troublemakers, which Pokemon you most certainly definitely have to keep alive in order that you do not get sweeped. Yeah, it was just kind of, in a way, I remember at the beginning of Gen 5 era, it was really difficult to get into the team preview thing, because it was such a huge thing in Generation 5, you know, keeping that late game sweeper hidden and eliminating certain Pokemon, and then revealing your late game sweeper and setting up the source dance with that Lucario or something like that, and then you know, sweeping. But now it's just with the team preview, it's a completely different nature. But I think all of us have definitely learned to accept the team preview, and now it's just kind of a part of the game, and there's nothing wrong with it. And while it basically just changed the complete nature of the metagame, how Pokemon is played in the singles metagame, and even like, I don't know how it worked in the Gen 4 doubles. Was there any kind of, I don't think there was in the VGCs. Was there a team preview? I don't know. I didn't really play doubles at all in the Gen 4. I don't think there was any kind of team preview in any sort of form. But so just thinking about the impact for the VGCs. But then again, I'm not a VGC player or doubles player, so I'm not gonna put too much effort in that. But you know, again, the team preview kind of just changed the nature of the game, killed those dedicated focus sash leads that were usually setting up rocks and trying to taunt. Killed those suicide leads, and I killed, you know, the scouting, the need for scouting. There was no longer need. You just outright see what your opponent has, and right off the bat, the first prediction that you make in the game is choosing the leads, which made for a really interesting concept, definitely, because you see what your opponent's had. You have to think like, what is he going to be leading off with, and then you have to respond correctly. And in some cases, you could just right off the bat win the match on the first turn, or before the match even begins, by choosing a correct lead and just getting off that good momentum right off the bat, instead of just, you know, scouting and trying to figure out what your opponent has, and trying to not get swept by the opponent's late game sweeper that he or she is trying to hide. But it's just yeah, completely changed the nature of the game, like I just said. And on that note, I have talked for way too long, but I kind of felt like team preview, definitely, in my opinion, when I think about all the things that I talked about in this heck of a long video, which I most likely will cut into 2 parts, I definitely think that the team preview had the biggest impact to when you compare it to no team preview, and because of the things that I just mentioned. And then of course the weather war was that's why I kind of had team preview on the #1 spot, and then the second would be the weather war, because that definitely had a huge impact on the meta game. And on that note, I've talked, like I said, for way too long, but I hope that some of you like listening to this. And on that note, somebody is actually calling me too, so I'll need to answer that. But I kind of finished saying everything that I wanted, so thank you so much for watching, and until next time with something different, this is Spade signing out. Peace.